I'm Martin Wilsey.
Hey, I'm Shane McGalley.
And I'm David Keener.
And this is the Hourlings podcast project. On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about fashion in fiction. Specifically, I'm talking about clothes today. I find it pretty interesting how people never really think about fashion in the books that they read, but it actually is really important. An example I can think of off the top of my head is the fashion in The Lord of the Rings. Oh boy, Tolkien would go on for so many pages describing the clothes of all the characters. It was a little bit too much, by modern standards. But I think that fashion is really important for a lot of reasons, especially genre. Fashion needs to fit the genre that you're in. Steampunk's a completely different genre than, say, fantasy or science fiction. And fashion's important there. I think that the time can be defined. The era in which the story is told can be defined. The fidelity can be made better by talking about what people are wearing. And it can be plot points too. So what do you guys think? How much fashion do you actually include in the stories you guys write?
I include a lot, and I agree that it's integral to world building. Maybe just as important as your fantasy religious structure, government structure, your maps, and all. Fashion is very atmospheric. And so I've used it in my fantasy, not so much in my sci-fi, but in my fantasy describing, armor, capes, cloaks, that kind of thing, gloves. But particularly I wrote a steampunk novel. That was very fun to write fashion for. So that was, Victorian, late Victorian, early Edwardian clothing, just total Downton Abbey vibes, the bowler hats and the ascots, and just really, really fun. So, yeah, I love fashion. I think that as an early writer, I underestimated using it in descriptions for introductions of characters. I think the novice toolbox for describing characters is hair color, eye color, height. That those three, the holy trinity of descriptions. But when I started to actually take fashion seriously in my opening descriptions of characters, I think I really improved my character descriptions and making them memorable. So I definitely encourage people not to downplay it. What do you think, Dave?
Well, I think in my case, it wasn't something I thought about as much. And I'm finding that there are some cases in my fiction where I think I had some missed opportunities to really kind of draw a better picture of a particular time period or a particular fantasy world. I have a pretty good example behind me, not from one of my worlds, but this is the illustration for an illustrated edition of Naomi Novik's Temeraire series. Temeraire is a dragon, and in this case, the protagonist that he's bonded with is reading a book to him. And you can see that he's in basically a British kind of uniform. And that almost instantly sets the time, the place. It gives you some ideas of what kind of rules he is under as an officer in the British Aerial Navy. It tells you a lot about the story just from what he's wearing. And I feel like obviously this is a very visual form of it, but I feel like these are the types of things I could do better with in my stories to really paint that picture.
I don't know if I can think of anything in history that had a professional bright green military outfit, like almost a pea green. That definitely strikes me as fantasy. Can you guys think of any historical examples of a light green military outfit?
I thought everything was black and white before 1930 or so.
Or sepia,
But it's also interesting if you're into like the military stuff. There is one line of books, and I forgive me, I don't have it in front of me. where they basically published books on every military force pretty much that's ever been, and detailed descriptions and pictures of the uniforms and things like that. Reenactors love those. Fantasy writers have used those. I've seen them at game stores before. So there's a whole series of books about just things like uniforms.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, it's
looking at
really
this.
interesting how far down the research rabbit hole you can go when you're researching stuff like that. I have a time travel novel in the works, and man, it's a hoot looking at the different fashions and realizing that how different they are from decade to decade. And it's really interesting because we're in the 2020s now. You look back at the 2000s and you can tell the fashion's different. You look back at the 1980s, it's completely different.
Yeah,
And,
the subtle changes decade to decade in modern times is very interesting too.
Yeah.
If you're a more modern
Who
writer.
says they're always subtle?
Yeah, I know. It's interesting, and it's funny how in recent decades things come back around.
Like bell bottoms, man, they're coming back.
Yeah, big time. And I think that, I don't know if you want to include like hairstyles into fashion, but it seems like that's a component of fashion. It seems like throughout history and stuff.
Well,
It-
sure.
It was really interesting, you know, doing time travel, and I was trying to write these time travelers who had to have, okay, what is the, you know, what's a fashion that I can wear going back and is going to be okay over decades or even centuries. And I've selected clergy because nuns' habits and priest habits, you know, haven't really changed all that much over the centuries.
Interesting.
So if you could land there and then do a little shopping.
Yeah. Well, imagine you're a time traveler. Let's say a female time traveler going back in time wearing a dress. You know, depending on the era, you know, she might fit in, or she might somebody might look at her and instantly consider
might
her
get
to be a
arrested.
prostitute, and she'd be subject to arrest.
Yeah.
Hairstyles also, hairstyles change, makeup styles change as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I mean, I think about powdered wigs on men, and you know,
Heights.
tights, and
So sexy.
pumpkin hose.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah, I'm looking at Dave's example and his background. Dave, talk for a sec, so it goes back to you so that people can look at it for a sec. Say something.
Hello.
There you go. All right, so I'm looking at like the whole outfit there, not just the green jacket, and it just makes me think about how there's a sense of responsibility too that comes with historical or fantasy outfitting of your characters, because at first I would have been tempted to maybe just describe the jacket, but you got a whole thing going on there. You got the particular types of boots that go with it, the pants, the shirt, and it's kind of like you have to be knowledgeable of this too. You have to do your homework and make sure that the things that you're putting on your characters would have actually gone together. Or, you know, I guess you have a little more flexibility.
Well, she has Naomi Novik has a little bit more latitude, because this is the dress of the aerial navy, so to speak.
yeah, that's alternate history. You get a big, you know, pass.
You get some flexibility, yeah, but it still has to go together. It still has to make sense. You know, you wouldn't put sneakers on this person. You know, you'd have to know what would go with what.
Yeah,
But
the fashion of footwear alone.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, shoes have been really, really super important for cultures over the centuries. And, you know, you're talking about different cultures too, as well as different eras. And then you add on that speculation of science fiction with stuff that's taking place in 2650. And it's really, I had a lot of fun doing that. You know, I still have guys wearing Pink Floyd t-shirts because classical music is very popular in the 26th century.
Well, you never know. Who would have expected, for instance, that Shakespeare would still be an exalted writer?
That's right.
Maybe Stephen King will be the exalted writer of the 26th century.
Yeah, who'd have thunk that, you know, denim would be around this long, you know, because denim used to be the working stiffs pants for like coal miners and guys back in the 1700s.
But there's also other aspects too that we haven't really talked about. So for instance, here in the 21st century, I have a bureau full of clothes upstairs and a closet full of some more. There are time periods where you might, if you were just a working stiff, you might only have 2 or 3 sets of clothes.
Yeah.
Maybe you could mix and match a little, but that's all you had. And they might have been something like linen or something like that.
Or leather.
Right.
Something more durable, something that you made yourself.
Or, nowadays, we can buy clothes, fashions change. So if you have several kids, the chances are they're getting their own clothes and they're not getting hand-me-downs from their older siblings. But on the other hand, if it's the 18th century and you have 8 kids, and clothes are really expensive, you're getting hand-me-downs, period, in the sentence. It's not even a question.
Right. Compared to, the 17th and 18th century, clothes today are like disposable. I mean, like this T-shirt, I must have, 8 of these T-shirts. And as soon as they get, worn down a little bit, they, go in the rag bucket. And, that would never happen in the 1700s.
You know what else I love about fashion and writing is when you can very casually include something like, my father gave me this sheeny wool vest or whatever, and the readers would know that a sheeny is some kind of creature, that maybe doesn't exist in our world, or throwing in a garwort leather boot. It's a great way to enter in some of those details very naturally, and you can expand that as much as you want in your fashion. This kind of leather came from this animal, this kind of wool, etc.
Yeah, there's also fashion of the future. I read a lot of science fiction. I include jumpsuits, for instance, are very common for me in the space travel stories that I do, and characters that spend time in 0G, might be wearing, their flight slippers that have Velcro on the bottom so that they can affix themselves to any walls or surfaces. Yep. And stuff like that. I do a lot of fashion, associated with sci-fi body armor, for instance, and technology associated with that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun to do.
Yep.
There's also the functional aspect of clothing, which can be stylish, but can also tell you something. The best example I can think of is in World War I, the pilots of those little biplanes, when they were dogfighting, it's not like you had instruments. So you were sitting in the cockpit, looking around, looking over here, looking behind you, moving your neck constantly. And it was also cold. So they had a jacket on and it was always chafing their neck. So it turns out they wore scarves to help both to help keep warm and to reduce the chafing as they were looking around for enemy fighters trying to target them, right? So there's an aspect there that it's stylish. They could be wearing a cool looking scarf, but it's also functional because it keeps them in better shape for combat. And that kind of thing is a really nice detail to be able to add to your story. It's fashion, but it's also function as well.
Yeah, I have actually used in both science fiction and fantasy the clues that the fashion of the characters wear can tell you a lot about their caste that they hold in the society. Where are they in the food chain and on the ladder of poor to wealthy? A lot of that clues can be added in there using their clothes to convey that kind of information subtly.
I would say that one warning I have with fashion, and this is just my personal opinion, I get a little bored when all the bad guys wear the same thing. like, you know, all the stormtroopers were the same exact thing, or all the, I don't know, Star Trek, you know. And so I don't know. It's just my personal opinion.
I would add all the good guys too. I mean,
That's true. It
if
just seems
you
lazy.
have a mono, you know, culture on anything, it's just kind of boring,
It
really.
seems yeah, it's lazy.
Well, I would also add though that even with stuff like that, soldiers and you know, military folks have always customized things, from unique paint schemes for their planes to you know, counting their kills on their planes, to decorating some of their part of their uniform, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of aspects even there that you can play with.
Yeah. I agree.
Out on the sharp end, I don't think there's as much concern about having your uniform be perfectly correct as it is about survival sometimes.
Mhm. And then there's using fashion for, you know, good old romance, you know, character dresses up real nice for an occasion, or, you know, the first look at a romance interest and he's wearing or she's wearing something very attractive. Yeah, that's always a very good use of fashion. And of course,
I like a romance with good lingerie.
there you
gotta say.
go, Marty. That's right. You preach, brother.
Well,
Yeah, and then and how much do we love the you know, the librarian who takes out the bun and wears the dress for the first time and shows up to the prom or whatever, or has a, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
How much do we love that?
but even there's different scenes I can imagine. For instance, you're going to a wedding. What's a steampunk wedding? What's a wedding
Right.
look like in a steampunk setting?
A fantasy wedding,
What's
yeah.
it look for in that setting for somebody who's noble versus somebody who's, say, one of the people who travels on those airships, right? You know, you could see fashion differences at both those levels that might be useful for your story.
Oh yeah.
Right.
So what else we got? Any other final thoughts before we close this up?
Yeah, I'm gonna send you. Can you share your screen?
Yeah, hang on a second.
I'm gonna send something to you. I want you to show the viewers. But Dave, you go ahead and share your final thought while I do that.
I guess that means I have to come up with a final thought. I just think you could, as with anything, you could overdo it. Like, I don't necessarily want to know what every single character in the story is wearing, unless it's relevant, unless it tells me something about the character or something about the crowd that they're in, or something I need to know that matters to the story. So be careful.
That's fair. All right, I sent it to Marty. You probably have seen this meme before, but I feel like it's just very relevant right now. Anticipation building for our Harry Potter fans, by the way.
I feel like we should have a drum roll inserted here.
Oh, you can do that for us. Have a nice.
Does that even get picked up?
A little bit. You need some pencils or something.
It's not working.
Drumsticks.
All right.
It's sending me a smile face. I presume you didn't want a smile face.
All right.
We got to teach you how to use email.
What's your final thought then, Marty?
I think that once I started thinking about this, I've read a lot of stories where they don't think about fashion enough. I have also read stories where it's more about the fashion than it is about plot. So be careful, you know, don't take the advice of just one episode of the Hourlings Podcast Project, but fashion's important in your stories. Use it for character development, for even plot advancement.
All right. I'm gonna share my. Oh, I can't share my screen. Darn it.
Wait, I can turn screen sharing on.
All right, do that.
We have the technology.
Yeah, we should have. I guess we should have thought of that one first.
That would have been smart of me.
All right, let's go.
Right, here we go. And we're sharing.
Now I'm afraid.
All right. I feel like this is very relevant to the current discussion. So fashion is awesome, but also be aware of like your timeline with fashion, I guess. So this says like, I wonder when Dumbledore thought that three-piece suits were out, and like very ancient wizard robes are suddenly in. So let's just all be, you know, a little bit cognizant.
What do you
of
mean
what-
ancient? I think that was contemporary for Dumbledore right then in the wizarding world.
Well, there you go. You know, maybe
The
maybe
evolution of style.
Yeah.
evolution of style, I guess. So that is my final thought. But hey, I gotta say, he looks pretty snazzy, like in either. So,
Yeah, there's snazzy in both.
Of course,
kind of a fan,
if you're high enough level, you can wear whatever the hell they want. They just call you eccentric.
I'm kind of a bigger fan of you know, the robes, and I'm always a bigger fan of Richard Harris's Dumbledore. But a little bias there. Anyway, that's my final thought. Is a meme.
Dave, what about you?
He
Or
gave
did you
his.
go already?
I already gave my final.
Went his, yeah.
All right.
We're
Well,
out of
thanks.
here.
Good seeing you guys. And we'll see you again next week. Thanks
All
for
right.
stopping by.
Bye.